Hey everyone, in this second video, I want to talk about my grading system and kind of the reasoning behind it because it is quite different than what you're probably used to in a traditional math class. And we'll also talk about assessments and the details of how you come in to campus to take those assessments. So first of all, my grading system. It's called standards-based grading. And the idea behind it is that rather than grading exams and your overall performance in the class by like giving you math problems and assigning you a certain number of points to those math problems and then say letting you know that you got 17 out of 23 points on an exam or a quiz or something like that. Instead of doing that, what I'd rather do is break the class into topics, which I call standards, and then let you know what level of mastery you're at. Okay. There's a couple of reasons that I do this. Number one is because it helps the grading to have more meaning. Okay. So if you have a question that I've asked you and you get 6 out of the 10 points on that question, what does that really mean? It's not really that clear. What would be nicer is if when I give you the feedback and say, hey, here's where you're at in terms of your level of understanding on this topic, that you could actually attach some meaning to it and say, okay, I was able to do these types of things, but not these other types of things. And so therefore, I've got a good idea of what's going on, but I'm still developing in my understanding. Or, maybe I'm at an expert because I'm an expert now because I can do everything that's been asked of me in this topic. So I want the grading to have more meaning. The second thing is in standards-based grading, your grades are not static. They can move. So I really believe in that, in the growth mindset and the idea that when you don't do something correctly at first, that it just means you haven't done it correctly yet. All right. So I'm less concerned with you getting it right the first time as I'm just concerned with you getting it right. So built into my grading system is the ability to bring your scores up after an initial performance on some sort of an assessment. Okay. So we'll go into the details of that in this video. So let's start by me sharing my screen here. All right, so the first place I'm going to take us is to the important documents, and I'm going to click on the rubrics first of all. So this rubric is a document, rubrics document is a document that has a rubric for every single standard, every topic in the class. Okay, so you can see standard one, standard two, standard three, and so on. And they all have things written down for what it means to be either expert, proficient, developing, novice, or not yet. Okay. I have a general rubric here at the beginning to kind of give you an idea of what do these terms mean generally. So expert, the ability to accurately address the most complex and advanced problems within an objective has been demonstrated. Okay. Proficient, the ability to apply concepts appropriately and with accuracy to address standard problems has been demonstrated. On the most complex problems, there is a flaw in either the synthesizing of the many strategies required or the execution of some complex task. All right, so to kind of break that down a little bit, if you're at a proficient level of mastery, it means you can do all the bread and butter type of problems that I ask. But on the harder problems, maybe little mistakes here and there, right? You're not 100% clear on like the very most challenging types of questions. All right, if you're developing on a topic, it says factual information about the topic is demonstrated fully or almost fully. Appropriate methodology is used to solve basic problems, although minor flaws in the execution are present. On more complex problems, an ability to connect the concept or standard with previous topics or to use many steps to solve a problem has not been demonstrated. All right, so you're doing some things right. You're demonstrating some factual knowledge and some ability to do basic problems, but maybe make bigger mistakes as the problems go up in difficulty level. At a novice level, a basic understanding of the objective has been demonstrated. Evidence is typically limited to recalling factual information for some but not all aspects of the topic. There is either no ability demonstrated to apply the concept appropriately to problems, or there is some fundamental flaw in the execution. So you are getting across some of the correct ideas, but not usually in a way that allows you to really complete problems fully. And then not yet just means you really have, either you're leaving it blank or you're kind of off topic in the way that you're responding. So that's just kind of generally what these mean. But what's more useful to you is that in each standard, I articulate what it means in that standard. Okay. So just let's see, just as an example, standard 4 is about evaluating solving functions numerically and graphically. I'll just read one of them here. Developing. The student shows a firm grasp of evaluating functions and using function notation. However, the student shows an inability to solve functions in some contexts. So I've really tried to clearly lay out what it looks like if someone's at a developing level. Okay. Now, first of all, this expert, proficient, developing, novice, and not yet, this is how I'm grading you. I'm giving you one of those 5 levels of mastery for every standard. The little numbers are just my shorthand for those. And so these are the things that I'll enter into the grade book. So 4 means expert, a 3 means proficient, and so on. However, those numbers, you are not to do math with them. You're not to try to calculate an average with those or anything like that. They are just shorthand stand-ins for these levels of mastery. Okay. And then finally, when I assign you a level of mastery, then just know that that's not the end of the story. You can do things to improve your level of mastery, and I'll describe that in detail momentarily. All right, so that's kind of the setup of standards-based grading. Okay, but how do I end up assigning you those levels of mastery? Okay, so here's where the assessments come in. Right? So let me just be real concrete about this. I'm going to scroll down to this module that says standards 1 through 5 assessment. Okay. So right now it just says standards 1 through 5 assessment, Tuesday, April 15th. Okay. Let me click on important assessment information here. So on that day, you are to come into the test proctor center. Okay. So, if you are near the Yakima campus, you'll come to the Yakima Test Proctoring Center, and here's all the information about its hours and its location and everything. So you go there and you're going to take your tests there. And I call them assessments. Okay, so when I say assessment, what I mean is test. Okay, so when you go there, it'll be a paper pencil assessment that you'll bring your calculator for. And then on the Grandview campus, here's their hours and their location. And then if you are far away from both campuses, there is absolutely a way for you to get a proctor approved nearer to you. So in the orientation quiz, I have attached a document that you have to fill out in order to essentially apply to have a different proctor, and then it has to go through an approval process by YVC. So just if that's you, start that process right away as you go through that orientation quiz, and then also send me a Canvas message, just letting me know that, hey, I'm working on this. So things like colleges or libraries, those are usually the two that are pretty easy to get approved. So there is an ability for you to take tests other than in Yakima or Grandview, but just get the ball rolling on that right away. All right, so you go in, you take that paper test. When you receive it back, okay, what'll happen is I'll grade it and then I'll send it back to you, graded. I'll send images of it back to you. And what you'll see is it'll be different than a typical math assessment, because at the top, you're not going to see a score. It's not going to say like 82% or anything like that, right? Like you're probably used to in a math class. What it's going to have are 5 different levels of mastery. Okay. And let me just, I'll just open a Word document here just to kind of make this more concrete. So what you'll have here, they open OneNote instead, sorry. What you'll have is you'll have this assessment. And since the first one's on standards 1 through 5, and it'll be multiple pages and everything, right? So you'll have a problem number and it will label what standard it's covering. Maybe something like this. Some standards have multiple questions. Some standards might just have one question. You get the idea. Maybe standard 4 has multiple questions. Right? Just a heads up, probably there will be more than 7 questions on the first assessment, but I'm just trying to give you a for instance here. So rather than when you get this assessment back from me, rather than seeing a score at the very top of the page, what you're going to see instead is a level of mastery assigned. So let's say on standard 1, you get an expert. Well, remember for shorthand, I use 4 for an expert. On number 3, let's say you got developing. So you got 2. Standard 3, you got a 4. And then maybe for standards 5 and 6, you got a 3. And then you struggled a little bit more with standard 5, so you got a 1. So those are your levels of mastery. So that's what you would see on your paper is these 5 different levels of mastery. So 3s and 4s are good. You're going to probably be pretty happy with those. But things below a 3 are ones that you would like to be able to bring up if you can. And so what will happen is at a later date, you will have the opportunity to come back into the test proctoring center and do a reassessment. On the reassessment, you don't have to reassess on everything. You just have to reassess on the things that you want to improve on. So if this was me as a student, I would probably pick standard 2 and standard 5. And my goal would be to increase my scores on those. So when you came in to take that reassessment, they would give you a packet of materials. And again, all the questions would be labeled as standards 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you're just going to do the ones where you want to improve your score. Okay. And when you do that, if on your reassessment you do better than what you had before, so let's say on the reassess, you then got a 4. Well, it doesn't matter that you had a 2 before. Now you're at an expert level. And on the 1, maybe you didn't improve quite as much on that one, but you did improve. Well, I'll replace that 1 with a 2. So when you improve your score, I just completely replace it. I don't average it or anything. Okay. So the idea is, like I said, I'm not as concerned about if you didn't get it the first time. I want to make sure you've learned it. Okay. That's my goal. It's kind of like, probably a lot of us have had this experience where you maybe don't pass your driver's test the first time. Well, if you go back, study some more, then come back, take it again, pass with flying colors, you don't get a different license than everybody just because it's the second time you took it, right? The point is now you're a good, now you've been able to prove yourself as a driver, right? In the same way, when you do that reassessment, now you've been able to prove yourself, especially on standard 2, right? So I'm going to give you the benefit of saying, okay, now you've got it. So that's a real key to standards-based grading is that you get to improve scores as you go, right? So, more details on when reassessments are and things like that as we go. But what I will say actually is that I pointed this out in the previous video. Go back to our documents here. If I click on the syllabus, you do know when it's going to be because in the syllabus, I have listed all the dates. So you'll take a standards 1 through 5 assessment on April 15th, the 6 through 11 on April 30th, and then you'll take a standards 1 through 11 reassessment. So your opportunity to reassess on those first 11 on Wednesday, May 7th, right? So you're going to have these opportunities. So in general, you should plan on one opportunity to reassess on standards. At the end of the quarter, though, I do give you one last chance on your choice of 5 standards from throughout the entire quarter. So it's one of those things where you should just plan on one opportunity to reassess on things, but then at the very end, I'll give you one more chance on a limited number, is the way it'll work. Okay. The other thing about assessments is that I provide these assignments called 1 through 5 assessment preparation assignments. And in these assessment preparations, I want to kind of walk you through these because they really do help you to really feel confident going into the assessments. Okay. It's important to say, though, this is not the assessment itself. I've had students kind of get confused about this. This is a preparation, right? A review assignment, essentially. Okay. They have 4 parts to them. Part 1 is just a whole bunch of practice problems for you to do. So you got all these practice problems. And they're all labeled according to what standard, right? They're covering. And then what I ask you to do in part 2 is to grade yourself. Now, one of the things this is for is to help get you used to my grading system. But what you're going to do is you're going to look at each standard, okay? And you're going to read the rubric, and then you're going to decide based on how you did up here on these problems, you're going to decide what level of mastery you think you're at. And you're going to assign yourself a level of mastery for all 5 of these. To help you, of course, to decide, I do provide a detailed solution. And sorry, screen froze for a second. I provide you detailed solutions in red here for the standards. And so you can kind of grade yourself based on my detailed solutions. And then part 3 isn't really something you have to write down, but this is just saying, hey, if you're below where you want to be on any of the standards, here's some resources that can help you prepare for the assessment. So this assignment you're working on ahead of time, right? Well before the assessment. And then finally, the last part is if you can take the mistakes that you made and actually write a sentence or two explaining your mistake, then you can feel like, okay, I think I've got that corrected now. So that's the last part of this. So this is like written assignments in that you go ahead and do this, and then afterward, sorry, this doesn't look quite right because I'm not in student view. So let me go ahead and go back to student view here. So just like a written assignment, after you've done them, you go ahead and then upload pictures of it here. So it's just like a written assignment in that case. And that should help you feel a lot more confident going into the assessment itself. Right? So you have your initial assessments. There's the opportunity to reassess later. Okay. The one other thing to talk about is there is a final exam. And so how does the final exam factor into your grade? Well, here's how. Okay. So as we're going throughout the quarter, you'll have a level of mastery assigned for every single standard. So let me just, what we're going to do on the final is in some senses, the final is kind of like a reassessment, but it's also does have the potential for your grade to go down. Okay, so let me describe how this works. Let's say on standard 1, before the final, you had a 3, so a proficient. And then I ask about standard 1 on the final, and you get a 4, then your overall level of mastery for that topic is a 4. So that's how it's like a reassessment. You do better, then you get to replace your old score with the better score. Let's say going into the final, you had a 4 on standard 2, and then the final exam is not going to include everything. There's not enough time for that. So let's say standard 2 does not appear on the final. Well, then, of course, you're going to have a 4 on that standard. Standard number 3, let's say you had let's say it was a 4 going into the final, but then maybe you struggled a little more on the final on that and got a 2. So this is going to be the one and only time during the quarter that I do average. So average a 4 and a 2 to a 3. The averaging can also work this way as well. Like let's say you had a 3 before the final, and then you got a 2 on the final. Well, the average of 3 and 2 is 2.5. Okay, so what does that mean? It means you get half of a 2, and you get half of a 3. Okay, so some things are going to appear on the final exam, some things aren't. For the things that do, you do better. It replaces your old score. If you do worse, I average your old scores. And then how that all factors into a grade is this. I'm going to show you kind of the less friendly way first of how to digest this, and then I'll show you a little easier way second. So in the syllabus, here's how I determine the grade. I tally up all your experts, all your proficients, developing, novice, and not yet, and I just tally up how many of each that you actually have. And then based on this table, that's how it translates into a letter grade. So just for example, of the 27 standards, you need to get 15 of them at an expert or a proficient level in order to get a C in the class. Okay. Going for higher grades, then an A you can get if you get 21 experts and no more than 6 proficients, and then no developing, novice, or not yet. Okay. So this table is rather complicated. It has lots of aspects to it. You have to have a certain number of experts and proficients, but not too many novices, and so on. Don't want any not yets. Okay, so this is the table that I use at the end of the quarter. Okay, however, I realize that this is not a very useful table for you to use throughout the quarter to keep tabs on where your grade is. Okay, so let me show you how to keep track of your own grade. So I'm going to go into course grades. This is my fake student account here. Now, the first thing is you can arrange your due dates in Canvas. You can arrange them in different ways. So what I would suggest is do them by assignment group, hit apply, and then that will put the levels of mastery on the standards up at the top of your page. So for my fake student here, looks like they have a 4 on standard 1, a 3 on standard 2, 2 on standard 3, and so on. So I'm just putting those scores right in here. Okay. Remember that these numbers, they correspond to levels of mastery. They are not, you don't do math with them, right? So don't try adding up all the tops of the fractions and then dividing by the sum of all the bottoms of the fractions to get some sort of average. That would be totally meaningless. Okay. What you do with these is you can go to, in the important links module, the grade projector. So this is probably what most students, how they would prefer to kind of keep tabs on their grade. What I did was for my fake student, I went ahead and typed in this, it says use at the end of the quarter. I went ahead and typed in all the scores that are in Canvas. And down here at the bottom, it will tell me the grade. Okay. So C+ is what all that stuff that I had typed in amounts to. Now, you won't know what your scores on all the standards are until the very end of the quarter, right? So what I've done is I've made a column for each for you to be able to use after each assessment. So even after your first assessment, where you only assess on the first 5 standards, you can type your scores in to those 5 slots and it'll give you a projected grade. Okay. You just need to be careful about what this means and what it doesn't mean. So, what this spreadsheet is doing is it's saying, you got 2 4s or 2 experts in the first 5 standards. So, we think that if you continue at this pace, you're going to end up with 11 experts at the end of the quarter. You got 2 proficients, 2 3s. So, we think you're going to end up with 11 by the end of the quarter. And you got 1 developing. So, we think you're going to end up with 5 by the end of the quarter. So 2 things to keep in mind. Number 1, okay, maybe you got a 2 here, but maybe that's the last 2 you get for the whole quarter. So it might be completely illegitimate to be assuming that there's going to be 5 more. Okay. Secondly, remember that scores can be improved through reassessment. So if after you take that first assessment in standards 1 through 5, let's say you struggled more on a couple of these and you had 2 novices, so 2 1s, well, right now you're projected to get a D. Well, that's because it's projecting that you're going to end up with 11 1s at the end of the quarter. Okay. So understand that, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to work hard, I'm going to study, and I'm going to reassess on those standards. And I'm going to bring those up. And if I bring those both up to 3s, I went from a D to a B minus, just like that. Okay. So, especially at the beginning of the quarter, when you haven't assessed on most of the standards yet, this is pretty volatile. So, if you're ever concerned about what you see, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to talk through what this is saying in the grade projector. But I hope you'll find this tool useful. It'll help you just kind of keep tabs on how am I doing as I go through the quarter. All right. Now, you might be wondering, well, it looks like everything is based on your assessments. And that's actually kind of true. It's almost all based on your assessments, but keep in mind it's based on assessments where you can then come in and assess again and improve your score. Okay. So it's not 100% based on assessments, though. If I click back on the rubrics page here and I go to the very end, homework does factor into your grade. So there's a homework standard 27. And if you have 90 to 100% complete, you get basically a free 4, a free expert out of the deal. 80 to 90%, you get a 3, and so on. So yes, homework matters, but it's factored into your grade in this way, as opposed to like another math class where it might be like 10 or 15% of your grade. Right? So homework, of course, is incredibly important to help get you prepared for your assessments, but also it does factor into the grade itself. Okay, so that's how the grading works for the class. That's how the assessments work for the class. So if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Use the Canvas messaging system. Send me a message letting me know what your questions are. But now that you watched this second video, you can get started, right? So you can go to the Start Here module, do the Introduce Yourself and Orientation quiz. And then after doing that, you can, of course, don't forget to get all these documents either printed out or in an electronic form that you can take notes on. Also, make sure that you get your calculator situation squared away. And we don't want to run out of calculators for any of you in this class. So please visit. If you're going to borrow one, please visit the Library and Media Services as soon as possible to get your calculator so we don't run out for you. And then finally, once you've got all that done, go ahead and get started, right? You go into the video notes, you have your notes printed out, you take notes right along with the lesson on video here. Okay, I look forward to a great quarter and look forward to working with you. And please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions you have. Thanks.